Hey, welcome back to the Crochet Crowd. So it's my friends over at yarnspirations.com. Christmas stitch along. Today we are going to work on gauge. So the yarn that I decided to use for the stitch along in the study of the journey is Patons Inspired. Now when I get yarn, see, there's no barcoding, there's no extra detail. I get the yarn when it's in prototype format. So one of the secrets behind the scenes of this particular blanket is that I got the yarn well before it actually went live to the consumer base. So the colors that I used are colors that I was given for prototyping in order to take a look at this yarn. So I have all the colors here, and I only have like just a few balls of each. And so what I'm going to do for my study that I'm going to film is that I'm just going to go through my collection and just pull the yarn that I want to use. I'm one of those people where if I'm going to do it twice, I want to do the second one completely different than the first as far as color wise, so that it keeps me interested. So the yarn that we're doing today is Patons Inspired. So the gauge is going to be matching this particular one, and we're going to be running through the gauge. Now let's talk a little bit about the book next. The study of the journey is going to be in our book. This is not a free book. The pattern is not a free one as well. So if you would like to follow along for the instructions, there's crochet diagrams, also written instructions to be able to follow, and blown up photography inside this book. So what I'm going to be doing in this particular series is that I'm going to be running through the instructions, but I will not be showing you what the pattern diagram looks like. So if you want any of that information, you can either download the book on your Kindle, or you can order the book at your local bookstore or an online source. And I'll put the ISBN number for this book here. So as being a YouTube host, I didn't want to necessarily put out a book that doesn't have tutorial support. So I chose one pattern, which is the study of the journey, to be the one that will be filmed to help you out because it's part of the series. So let's flip to the study of the journey. So the study of the journey is on page number 46. Now my testers, I asked them to use different yarn. So you'll find what their yarns was, but I did actually post in the article that is linked here what those yarn requirements were for the Patons Inspired, so that you can be thinking ahead about the yarn choice that you would like to do. So if you want to see what the other team members did for the testing, that has been listed inside this book. So what we have here is that we are going to go through this. So if you're substituting your yarn, which I have no issues with, just make sure that your gauge matches. Because this is going in a round circle, if your gauge doesn't match, you have the potential of your afghan to buckle or to ruffle. So this afghan should sit completely flat, and we have to test our gauge. So without further ado, we're going to head on over to the table, and I'm going to show you a gauge check so that you can make some informed decisions about the yarn that you're deciding to use. And again, color is kind of irrelevant, but if you'd like to follow exactly the color outline, you can do that here in the book as well. So let's head on over to the studio table, and let's do that now. So each one of our hands are different on the way that we structure our stitches. It's called tension or gauge. So when the gauge is given for this is my own tension that has been applied to there. So every particular pattern that's out there, the tension or the gauge is actually different towards whoever actually designed it. So what I want to do is that I want to match the gauge, and here's the Patons Inspired. So if you didn't know this, from what I understand for Patons Inspired, the entire color line is inspired by the exterior home colors that you would find across Canada. So that's actually pretty cool. So I'm going to recommend a 6.5mm size K crochet hook, and you can try that, and then you're going to do a gauge swatch. You don't need to wreck the yarn in order to do that. We just want to test our gauge and make sure that the hook is going to match, and then adjust accordingly. So let's do a gauge check. So I'm going to recommend that you chain a total of 16. Now it's been a year since I crocheted the original sample, so my gauge in my own hands can actually change in that time frame. So what I want you to do is create a slip knot and chain a total of 16. So 1, 2, 3, 15, and 16. So for those that know how to do gauge, you know that this is probably longer, which it is, than 4 inches, but when it compresses down, that's what we're worried about. So what I want to do is create more stitches so that if it does compress, then you know how many more stitches that it would be and how to adjust your hook afterward. So let's begin row 1. So go second chain from the hook, just get the back hump of the chain. So just count it back, so 1 and 2, and I want you to single crochet on the back hump of the chain all the way across your row. So please do this. This is row number 1. So now that I got all the way across on row number 1, I want to check already. So I'm just going to lay it down, and you can see that it's bigger than 4 inches. or 10 centimeters, depending if you were doing metric. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to continue using that. So it is a little bit bigger than what I need, but the fact is that it's better to be bigger than it is for this to be like at 3.5 inches. So that I'm going to continue with that hook in order to get my sizing. So what I need you to do is just turn your work and begin row number 2 all the way to 4 inches tall. So now that the work is turned, just chain up 1 and just do 1 single crochet in each of the stitches all the way across. And then when you get back to the other side, just turn your work, chain 1 and 1 single crochet across. And your goal is just to get this to be 4 inches from this point here all the way to the top point. So what I want you to do is just go back and forth until you get approximately 4 inches. You can do a little bit bigger if you wish, but I wouldn't waste your time. But just continue to go, and I'll be back in a second and we'll do a gauge check once we get there. Okay, so once you think that you got 4 inches done, you can be able to measure that there's 4 inches. Okay, so make sure that you can do that in both directions. So you can see that this was actually 5 inches wide. That's okay. I want to get a stitch count. That's my goal. So what I want to do is lay this down, and I want to count the number of stitches that it's going to take in order to get to the 4 inches. So just start a little bit off from the edge and just start with 1 stitch there. So let's count all the way to 4 there. So let's do that. So we're gonna say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. So I have 12 in that direction. So I'm looking at the pattern. Do I need 12? Absolutely. Got to check that. The gauge is 12 single crochets by 13 rows. So 12 is correct. Now if you got to the 4 and it was like 13 or 14, it means that you're crocheting too loose. So what I would recommend is try again using a smaller hook, maybe a 6 millimeter or even a 5.5 millimeter. So that's either an I or a J. So just to get yourself smaller. Now if you crocheted along here and all of a sudden that you have your 12 and it's around the 3 inch mark, it means that you're being really tight. So you have to increase your hook size in order to get it. Concentrate on the width more than anything. So we know it is 12 single crochets in one direction. Turn it the other way and we had 13 rows high, I believe that it was. Let me just quickly look over. So 13 rows. So I want to check that. So I can look at each one of these. See how it's kind of ribbed? That's 2. So it's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, and you can see that it just goes over a little bit more. So there's your 13. Again, if you're going to do your gauge, concentrate on the width more than anything, and that should be good to go. So do your gauge check with the yarn that you wish to use. You notice that I did not fasten this, I didn't clip this off. So what I'm going to do now that I confirmed, I'm just going to rip it out or frog it out, put it back with the yarn ball so that it's still one piece, and I can use that in the future so it's not a waste. So please do your gauge checking, and next time I see you we'll be progressing into the pattern.